There's a moment many people who grew up in the 1970s recognize instantly. It's when something breaks, changes, or goes wrong. And instead of reacting loudly, you quietly handle it. No announcement, no drama, just a steady response that comes from somewhere deep. That instinct didn't appear by accident. It was learned. People who grew up in the 1970s carry a form of strength that doesn't try to prove itself. It's not built on confidence that needs validation, but on endurance shaped by time. They learn how to move through life when things were slower on the surface, yet emotionally unspoken underneath. And if you look closely, you'll notice that this generation carries a very specific emotional imprint, one formed in the space between worlds. They grew up at a crossroads. Childhood happened in an analog reality, but adulthood demanded adaptation to a digital one. They were raised with traditional expectations, then asked to survive entirely new systems. That contrast didn't just change their habits. It shaped how they process stress, connection, loss, patience, and meaning. As children, time moved differently. Waiting was unavoidable. Curiosity wasn't instantly rewarded. If you wanted answers, you had to ask. If you wanted connection, you had to show up physically. There was no constant stimulation pulling attention outward, so attention turned inward. That environment created a different relationship with thoughts and emotions, one built on reflection rather than reaction. Psychologically, this trained people from the 1970s to experience life as a sequence of moments rather than a stream of information. They learned presence before distraction existed, and that foundation still lives inside them, even as the world around them speeds up. One of the defining traits of this generation is adaptability, without complaint. They witnessed cultural shifts that rewrote how people work, communicate, and define success. They didn't grow up preparing to be visible all the time. Privacy wasn't something you protected. It was simply how life worked. And then suddenly, visibility became expected. So they adjusted, not loudly, not perfectly, but consistently. They learned new rules without being taught how to emotionally process the loss of the old ones. That create a form of flexibility anchored in quiet endurance. Internally, many people from this generation live with a contrast. There's a deep preference for simplicity and grounding, paired with a constant awareness that staying still means falling behind. Even when they appear calm, there's often an ongoing mental translation happening, decoding a world that keeps changing its language. Emotional restraint was also learned early, not because feelings were absent, but because expression wasn't encouraged. You didn't unpack everything. You didn't center your emotions. You learned to keep going. As a result, many people from the 1970s feel deeply but struggle to articulate vulnerability. They were praised for composure, even when things were heavy. This created adults who are dependable and emotionally aware, but often misunderstood. They sense nuance easily. They notice emotional shifts, but they don't always verbalize what they feel. Strength became associated with containment. Boredom also played a critical role in shaping this generation. With fewer distractions, the mind learned to wander. Creativity grew out of stillness. Problem-solving developed through trial rather than shortcuts. Sitting with discomfort wasn't optional. It was normal, and that cultivated patience, a trait that now feels increasingly rare. Their understanding of relationships was shaped in that same rhythm. Affection wasn't constant reassurance. It was reliability. Connection was built through presence, not availability. Conflict happened face-to-face, where tone and silence mattered. This taught them to value consistency over charisma, actions over promises. As adults, this makes them slow to open but deeply loyal once they do. Trust isn't assumed. It's earned, and when it's given, it's steady. Independence is another cornerstone of their psychology. Supervision was limited. Exploration was expected. Mistakes were part of learning. This created an internal confidence that doesn't announce itself. They know how to figure things out because they've had to. Many comforts didn't exist yet. So resilience was built through experience, not reassurance. But this independence also made them sensitive to change. The world they understood disappeared quickly. Communication transformed. Values shifted. Skills that once mattered became undervalued. This can create an internal question that never fully leaves. Adapt completely or protect what mattered. Most do both. They evolve, but they don't abandon the emotional truths they were shaped by. That's why they hold a rare perspective. They understand speed, but they remember slowness. They recognize urgency, but they value depth. Responsibility also runs deep in this generation. They were taught to show up, to help, to endure, to not center themselves. This creates reliability, but it also leads to exhaustion. Asking for help doesn't come naturally. Rest often feels undeserved. Nostalgia carries weight for them because their memories are physical. Life was tactile. Waiting was real. Loss felt final. Achievements felt earned. Those experiences gave memories texture. Nostalgia becomes grounding, not escapism. Beneath it all is humility shaped by exposure to change. They've seen enough to know certainty is fragile. They've adapted enough to know nothing stays fixed. They've endured enough to value small moments. That combination creates emotional richness. Silence also shaped their emotional balance. Before constant stimulation, stillness was common. That trained observation and inner regulation, while they can function in modern noise, often feels draining. Their nervous systems prefer meaning over momentum. They return to simple rituals for grounding, walking, reading, quiet conversation. These aren't habits. They're anchors. Uncertainty was introduced early. Plans changed. Outcomes weren't guaranteed. Improvisation became a skill. This built adaptable strength, not rigid control. But self-reliance also made receiving support difficult. They learn how to carry weight quietly. Authenticity matters deeply to them because they grew up before performance became normal. Connection was built through shared experience, not presentation. They can sense what's real quickly and are drawn to consistency over polish. Gratitude developed naturally because nothing was instant. Small things mattered. That appreciation didn't disappear with convenience. There is often an unspoken longing, not for the past itself, but for what it represented. Presence, slowness, human attention. That longing guides how they live now. Their sense of identity was shaped through action rather than self-definition. As the world changed, they had to reinterpret themselves slowly and deliberately. That process created introspection without spectacle. Loyalty runs deep. Commitment is sincere. Bonds are not casual. They open carefully, but fully. Ambition for them was gradual. Progress mattered more than recognition. They often underestimate themselves because humility was expected. Their memory holds emotion as much as event. Those memories inform how they love, work, and endure. Happiness for them is quiet. It arrives softly. It doesn't demand constant stimulation. They've lived through enough change to understand what matters. They know how to wait. They know how to begin again. They know how to endure without hardening. Their courage is subtle. It shows up in responsibility and patience, not performance. They understand imperfection. Things broke. People learned. Life wasn't curated. And that grounded them. People who grew up in the 1970s learned how to stay human as the world accelerated. They didn't chase relevance. They carried meaning. And that is what makes their psychology quietly powerful.